Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening in to the podcast this year. As we wrap up 2024, I wanted to wish you a very happy holiday season, whatever that's bringing for you, and remind you to make sure you take time for you to rest and recover so that you can have that sustainability within your clinical day. I'm really encouraged by the reviews I've been reading this year about the podcast, and I'm interested in hearing your stories. So I'd like to remind you to like and subscribe to this podcast if you're enjoying it. And please leave us a review so that we can hear your stories of transformation as you're hearing from us and our amazing guests that we bring into the podcast. Have a wonderful holiday season and a very happy new year, and I will see you in 2025. Before I go, I'm going to read out a couple of the testimonials from this year, which I'm excited to share with you as you listen in and enjoy the episode today. First off is from Dr. Mama7, who said, Sarah is such a fabulous resource for all doctors. Don't miss this podcast. Then from Family Doc Annie, thank you. Sarah shares such great practical advice for physicians looking to avoid or get out of burnout. Highly recommend. Thank you so much. Next, we have Angela Nesbitt. Sarah is a fulfilling in her mission to make it more possible for physicians to thrive despite difficult conditions. Contrary to what we might assume, there are so many people offering practical ways to help doctors thrive for the long term, and many of those people are on this podcast. I'm so happy that you're enjoying our guests, and I agree. We like to bring value and expertise beyond ourselves. HLB 2018 says, I always learn something new. Thank you so much for that review. Aram HH says, amazing guests and interviews. Strongly recommend you check it out. Thank you so much for your reviews, everybody. Because it's the holiday week, we are going to be replaying one of our more popular podcasts from this year. I will leave you there. Have a wonderful, happy new year. Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind those of you who are working on backlogs, just check in the www.chartingcoach.ca/backlog-buddies is a place you can come and do your backlog alongside fellow clinicians and physicians. So if you want to kind of hang out and have some ability to stay on task for the 2-hour sessions, come along. We'd love to see you there. Hello and welcome back, everybody. So today I'm bringing in Dr. Adam Stewart. I'm going to get you to introduce yourself in a moment. We're going to be talking about tips and tricks about efficiency in your clinical day. And I know this is going to be a topic that you're going to love and learn some interesting, fun things. So welcome, Adam. How are you?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. Tell us about you. What do you do now and how did it all start for you?
So I guess a little bit of background for those who don't know me. I'm a comprehensive family doctor. I practice in a small rural town called Maydock, Ontario, which is like halfway between Toronto and Ottawa. I've been in practice for nearly 15 years. Did all my training in London, Ontario at the Western University. Actually did undergrad, med school, and then residency there. I've been working in this in Maydock since I started practice for the last 15 years. Some of you might recognize me. I have a popular website that stewartmedicine.com, which I started mainly on the topic of efficiency we'll get to later, but as a repertoire for patients to have handouts and or self-management material that I could give them pre or post visit. And it's just kind of blossomed from there in terms of like blog articles on family medicine and all sorts of things. So people might recognize me from that. Or I also have done some roles with the OMA, the Ontario Medical Association, specifically the family practice section there, or Ontario MD, which is you just did a podcast with Chandy a few weeks ago on that. I used to be a peer leader there too. So thank you again for having me. I love this stuff and I look forward to talking about it.
Yeah, it's super good because I think that all of us, if we're trying to create that sustainable clinical day, we're always looking for what else am I not knowing about? What else am I missing? Where else are other people working within a clinical day? They're busy doctors, busy clinicians, and they're trying to kind of gather all of the things that they're doing in a day and work it out so that they can have their evenings and weekends back, which is what we're kind of focusing on. Is this something that you struggled with? Is that why you put this together? Tell us more.
So it's funny because I was thinking about this when someone asked me, like, and I've always had for some reason I've never taken any computer courses or computer programming, but I'm somehow drawn to EMR and learning how to make it more efficient. But it actually, when I think about it, it went back longer than this because I remember in med school as a clerk, I was on an OB-GYN rotation, and we they always had they wake up in the middle of the night as med students and you'd have to go take this history, and it was always the same kind of questions, right? And it like a lot of stuff. What I did is instead of writing this all out by hand, I thought, okay, and the thing is they needed paper. This was all paper charts back then, right? But they wanted it always on the hospital's letterhead. All the special little notepads had their letterhead. So I actually went home. I took a package of like a little of their letterhead, like blank paper with the hospital's letterhead, and on my computer I made a little like Word document with all the like check boxes, fill in the blank forms, kind of like basically a template. And I printed it all out of my printer. So I had these blank templates on all these histories and physicals. And I started doing this on when you get woken up in the middle of the night to go see a patient, and I just start filling in the boxes, and it would save me so much time. Now, interestingly, some of my preceptors at the time thought this was brilliant, and some thought, I was cutting corners and this, you're not allowed to do this and you should be learning it. But it's a funny story because I think that like clearly this wasn't just about computers and EMRs. This was this efficiency minded mentality that I had dating back to pen and paper days. The other thing I know in med school, we had a lecture on, I've always been kind of business minded, efficiency minded as well. We had a lecture by one of the preceptors there and who was teaching us about OHIP billings. And I was amazed at how just the concept of, okay, he's doing the same job as everyone else, right? The same great family doctor seeing his patients, but he's probably making 30% more because he knows his OHIP billing so perfectly, right? So that concept amazed me, right? Doing the same amount of work and getting paid more revenue, for example. And I think that really resonated with me. Some of the best advice I got, and it's kind of cliche, but read the schedule of benefits in Ontario and read it twice, like know your billing code so that you know exactly what you can bill and that. So it's those types of things that I think I just had this mindset of I hate repetition, and if I see something that is done that I'm doing things twice or in an inefficient way, my mind just automatically goes to, okay, how could this be improved?
So important. I like that. And I like that it sounds like it was there at the beginning. Like it wasn't that you had to go to this terrible place. What about during like residency and as you saw those EMRs starting to come out, what kind of changed about your practice?
So when I was in residency, we used really basic, like EMR was just, I think, coming out or becoming more popular. And some clinics were on it, some weren't. And the clinic we were using, I forget the name. I think, maybe I shouldn't mention, but I even forget the name anyway. But it was very basic, and it was kind of okay. And we weren't allowed to really get into the back end and make stamps or templates back then. Like it was frowned upon, or they didn't really give us the authority. I think at the end, I remember my residency of realizing there was a way to edit some of these questions. I thought this was fascinating. Then I got out into practice, and so I'm on TELUS PSV DMR, like half the doctors in Ontario are family doctors, and they would have this annual conference where you could go and learn, like people would present, this was the early days of EMR, right? Like really basic stamps and stuff. People would present tips, tricks, and things like that. And I was just like a sponge. It just fascinated me. And I would, and for the first few, they did this for, I don't know, 10 years every year. It was like a highlight of the year because I just love this stuff on how, again, I think we'll talk about it later, but how if you can save upstream work, if you can shave 30 seconds off a process that you do, um, 10 or 20 or 100 times a week, that's going to pay dividends downstream, right? So it always just, I was just right onto that. And I loved working with the computer and just kind of playing around with the tools and stamps and tricks and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is really good because some of us fear that messing with it, that we're going to muck it up, that we're going to, it's going to be too complicated, too hard, I don't want to. And it can really get in the way of those day-to-day efficiencies when we're doing so many things in addition to seeing patients and closing charts in our clinical days. All right, so you're noticing you versus your mentors. What's different about how you might have approached the day as you were seeing patients?
Like in practice,
Yeah.
I think I had great mentors. I think for the most part, I was lucky. My residency program was great. I think, again, just driven by this passion, this for better or worse, this obsession or passion about just an intolerance for inefficiencies. So, I mean, we can get into at some point the way I schedule my day, for example, is evolved. It's an evolving process. I think any of these things we're going to talk about, like whether it's scheduling or how to chart or how to tend to your email inbox. I mean, those things are subject to always be evolving, right? What might be the perfect process today might not be the perfect process 6 months from now. So, based on different technologies emerging or different patterns. So I think just always being on top of and willing to evolve.
Yeah, no, that's important. I think we've seen a lot of pivoting in the last 4 years. So I think we're
Yes.
kind of used to things changing,
Yep.
but we still, are going to approach it with probably some nervousness and discomfort. You mentioned that you had heard this OIP physician chatting and you noticed that his earnings were a bit higher. Did you know what your mentors were earning? Like, did you dive into numbers and business practices as you were kind of in that residency?
It's I don't know that we did. Some were more open, and I think we find this even nowadays, right? I mean, money's for some even not outside of it's just not just medicine, but money can be a taboo subject, right? And I actually, so when I think back, you're prompting my memory here, but I don't believe we did. I mean, there were certain mentors that were billing oriented and efficiency oriented, but we never really got into the numbers. I must admit. Now, I don't often take on. I'm in a rural town. I don't often have med students or residents, but when I do have them, and I'm open, I'm quite open, and I'll even show them my account, like accounting, and here's how it works, because I think it's important that people know these things and realize what's possible, because sometimes like if you're not an efficient, like there's going to be a whole spectrum of efficiency, right? And if you're not efficient, you're going to maybe set the bar a little too low, or think you can't reach this potential, as a quote, and I air quotes here, even as a family doctor. But like when you show the trainees, like and med students and residents, oh no, this is possible. You can have a practice like this that's run very efficiently, and you can get great returns on your time too.
Yeah, I find it fascinating because the same thing when I was a resident in Australia. I think unless you really showed interest, you weren't shown any of that side of things. But if you did show an interest, you may have a mentor that would be willing to kind of be more open. And I
Yeah,
would agree that when residents are in with me, I'm like, here's what we earned today, and here's how the billing numbers work, and blah, blah, blah. Kind of like just, and how much am I paying my staff, and how much am I paying in insurance? All those sorts of things are really helpful for that. What does it cost to have a family medicine practice?
yeah.
And what is
I
the percent of billings that's going to be, and that sort of thing?
I think back to your original question there. I did have great mentors in the fact that the program, it was rural family medicine in outside of it was in a small town called Mount Bridges, actually, where I did my residency. But I had the mentality in residency first year, and then especially in second year, is I've got to be able to um, pretend like this is me in my own practice, right? And whether it was the medicine part of it, but also the clinic management part, like how that I think that's important for especially last year residents to have that mentality is pretend like you're working on your own. You have the safety net of a preceptor if you need it, but you got the more you can get into almost pretending to practice independently. That's the way you should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had a 55% earnings was the minimum that we had a minimum that they would pay, and then we would earn 55% of earnings. So if your 55% of earnings was higher than the salaried rate, then you were going to earn more that week or that month. And it was all fee for service model within the practices we were working as residents, but not that was the only thing available. So yeah, it was an interesting, well, I can see more or less, and you can kind of notice the earnings, and then you kind of get curious about what is a normal overhead. And so we would talk amongst ourselves about what overheads were like, and like overhead meaning how much is going to be out of that would actually normally come out because you're going to pay staff and keep the lights on and pay for consumables and things. Yeah, interesting. All right, we're digressing into money, so let's come back because we're going to talk about that. I'm actually going to bring Adam back for a second podcast where we're going to talk more about uninsured services and some other fun things that he does in much more detail. But let's then go to how you started to look at your day from an efficiency point of view and things that really made a difference to you with regards to that sustainability.
Okay, I think I'll break it down. There's two areas. One is a foundational concept that I always talk about, and I've written an article on this too about it goes into some detail. And the primary principle is know the value of your time. And I actually written an article on where I've shown how there's lots of trackers on your smartphone these days that you can actually customize it and track your time. I developed a habit doing this long ago. Whether I track, and you can make it as granular or as basic as you want. But you start an activity like so when I go into clinic, I just have the habit of starting my app on my phone. When I'm at home at night, I'm working on my virtually. I start it virtually. When I used to do a merge, I'd start at the start of a shift, and I try to, it's not perfect, but you can different categories of work, you would start tracking your time. I've done this, I do this forever now, but maybe even if those who aren't so inclined may choose to do it for a week or a month. And what you can do at the end of it though, the more time sample size you have, the better, is you can then compare it against your revenue. So if you have like a tracking like accounting software like QuickBooks or something like that, you can export that. And I love Excel and spreadsheets and stuff, so I like to export these numbers and then slice and dice and the data. But the point is, you can start to come up with the value of your time, both in a general sense, maybe your overall yearly hourly rate, if you will, or even breaking it down into categories. Okay, what is my return on my time working in the clinic versus emerge versus nursing home versus being an Ontario MD peer leader, those types of things. Now, what that can do is it can help. Money isn't the only thing. You actually have to follow your passions and your interests, absolutely. But it is something to say, like all other things being equal. I used that back when I was in 5 years into practice. I had to make 5 to 7 years. I had to make a pivot. I did a merge as well as family medicine, and I was like, okay, well, I haven't seen a lot of, you kind of feel a little out of touch with the skills as a rural merge doc, doing maybe not as many shifts as your colleagues. So I was like, okay, do I go back and retrain and just to buff up on some skills, or do I just dive into just family medicine? And that was a complex decision, but it did involve looking at my hourly rate. And I could see, you know what, I'm making actually, they're on par. A well-run family medicine clinic at the time could make as much as a merge. So that helps say a decision like that. But then like even in your day, like what types of sub-interests as a family doctor you might pursue. Again, you got to pursue your passion and your interest, but you also got to look at the financial side, and that might help you decide on like what types of visits or subspecialties or different roles you take on on a daily or weekly basis. So that's one key thing. The other thing is, let's say hypothetically, there's going to be a wide range, but let's say a doctor, decides or calculates that their time is worth $350 an hour or something like that. Um, when we get asked to do things, like, so we're asked to do, so we're, as doctors, I think we're asked to do so many things, but not just medicine, right? But sit on this board or attend this meeting or do this or do that. And or can you participate in this? And I think if someone or is not recognizing the value of your time, it makes it a little easier to say no to some things. Like if your value of your time is worth $350 per hour and someone's offering you $100 to sit at a meeting or zero, you might be more inclined to say no and recognize these all as what's called like the concept of opportunity costs, right? Like when you're not making your potential, you're losing money somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Or time. Like if you've only got so many hours in a day and
yeah,
you're going to give up a whole hour to sit in a meeting, it better be worth it.
yeah, exactly. Like, and that's like it's although we talk about dollars and cents, it's more, yeah, that time figure, right? It's like the time is more valuable, and that how how much is a weekend with your family and friends worth to you, right? That you don't have to be doing all this extra work. As I think that's what you focus on, the whole concept of work-life balance, right?
Yeah, you can do anything you like with your time, but just like what you do with your time. And most physicians I come across do not like doing the charting as part of their volunteer work or weekend, right? Because they're often not getting paid anything extra for doing that. It's
The
just
the
eating
other
away their time.
the other part, we kind of hinted upon this earlier, but the big concept of upstream investment in upstream time and workflows that saves you time downstream, like it starts to pay off exponentially downstream. So I always, whenever I do a talks, I tend to put this comic up, and I'll just try. It's of cavemen. There's some cavemen trying to push a wagon with a square wheel, and they're struggling, right? And they're trying to push it. I think many people have seen this comic, and someone else is trying to hand them a round wheel. And then the people trying to struggling with the square wheel are saying, no, no, we can't right now. We're too busy. And the whole concept is that, yes, we as family doctors are crazily busy. Doesn't seem like there's enough free minutes in the day. And quite literally, sometimes there aren't. But if we say it's an EMR process or a workflow or something, if there's a process that you're doing even a few times a day or a week, let alone 20, 30, or 100 times, if you can shave 20, 30, 60 seconds off some of these processes, it starts to pay off downstream. Like spending an hour building an EMR tool, for example, or a stamp or a template or whatever, that then saves me 5 minutes every time I use it thereafter. It starts to really pay off. So well, you don't seem to have minutes at the start, you need to actually make the priority to invest in that time so that you actually end up saving time in a month later. I used to, when I was really busy, this was pre-pandemic. I was part of the OMA. I was doing Ontario MD. I was having a pretty big practice, and somehow I was I was squeezing it all in. I had a still practice of about 1,400 patients, I think, all throughout. And around the time of the pandemic, um, I wanted to reduce my roles. So again, going back to the whole concept, I was looking at my return on my time and things like that. And I said, okay, I'm just going to condense my work a little bit, get more free time, as we just talked about. But I realized that maybe all that work was taking up, 30, 40% of my time, but only giving me like 10% of my revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So when I stopped, the beauty was once I stopped doing those roles, it actually felt like I was working part-time because I'd become so efficient in managing this 1,400 patient roster that I was like, well, this is amazing. This felt like I was working part-time. I was getting home like 2, 3 in the afternoon some days. It was great.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like dream-like, amazing. How do you manage 1,400 people and get home at 2 or 3 in the afternoon?
Yeah. So a lot of this comes down to trial and error over the years. I mean, the pandemic taught us, it was a catalyst for some things, right? Like we're now we're kind of out of pandemic mode too, and maybe there was a bit of that too, where patients were staying away a little bit, maybe some for better or worse, they were staying away. Um, but it's these processes. So I'm quite efficient with the EMR, but
Mm-hmm.
I've also started even on my website there. I have this. I've been trying to promote not that it means anything to me, but this method of online triaging in my workflow. So instead of patients calling in and booking an appointment, I try to get them whenever possible. If they can use the internet to go on my website, and I use this adjunct technology that it's called Ocean, pretty popular for that most people know about. It allows patients to pre-answer some questions. You know, they click, oh, what is your concern? I'm having a sore throat. Ask you some questions and things like that. So I can get a lot of that information up front. But and then what the pandemic taught me was that very little may need to be seen in person. And like there's so many things that could be just as more efficiently managed by phone or by responding with an email or relaying a message verbatim via a staff member. And the classic example I give is, and I mentioned this in the demo video that's on my site there, is a skin spot. So too often in family medicine, there's a knee-jerk reaction. Patient calls in for a concern, in-person appointment. And then what happens is the day gets filled. I mean, I think many family doctors can turn around and look at their yesterday or last week and look at how many of those patients, maybe those visits didn't actually need to be seen in person, right? But so going back to the skin spot example, instead of a person calling in and saying, I have a skin spot, and then my staff just booking them in for an appointment, when possible, I'll get them to answer those questions and then email in a photo. So because I point out that a skin spot for me in my workflows as a family doctor could be probably one of three things. It could be a quick thing that I just need to zap with liquid nitrogen, which takes a 5-minute visit, or it could be something that's too big or maybe it's on the face or it's too complex that I need to refer anyway. I can send a referral based on just the photo alone. Or maybe it's something I need to biopsy myself and I need to book the patient in with my nurse in my procedure room. So those are three very different types of visits. Under the traditional way, the patient would come in, you do that assessment, and then they have to have another visit for that procedure potentially. Whereas if I can get that photo up front, I can without even having the patient come in for a single visit, I can direct it, and in 2 of the 3 of those options, I'm not taking up a full visit spot. I mean, that's one little example, but it's kind of a really tangible classic example to show how workflows can change. And then what happens is you're leaving your most precious resource, the bottleneck of your time is your in-person visits, right? You're saving those for people who truly need to be seen. And that's one of the ways you can really manage a 1,400, 1,600 patient roster quite effectively.
Yeah. And I'll point out that you've got, that doesn't affect your income, whether you're seeing them in person or if you're doing those, the way you're paid within your model of care, right?
Right. So we were talking before here with even the little differences between Alberta and Ontario. So Ontario, as many people would know, is more than half family doctors are under a full model, FHO model, or the capitated model. So, I mean, if I bring a patient in for a minor visit, I think the shadow billing works out to like $5 or something. So sometimes you've got to play that, like look at the math and stuff. And for the most part, you're getting the bulk of your revenue from the flat rate, and very little of it is driven by at least in the way things currently are in the percentages, very little is driven by, if I call the patient, which is versus it's 85% of 15 or sorry 19% versus the 15 or 18, 19% what it is now. Point is, very minimal difference in the revenue for the Ontario family doctors, regardless of which way you're treating this.
Yeah, I think that it does take factor into how we would start to triage, but it's important to notice how other people's workflows are working, because we may be able to incorporate some of this information in when we're thinking about, oh, why did they get booked in? I don't need to see them. I just need to pass on some information. I could have just, these type of frustrations that you're noticing about your day. It's like, well, how could I have intervened there and made that a part of the workflow?
To that point, the other part of that whole online triage is that, as I mentioned at the start of the talk here, I have a website that I've written over the years. I've accumulated and written lots of articles on, okay, well, here's how you can self-manage coughs, colds. Here's a self-managed pink eye. Here's back pain. All of these self-management and empowering patients to look after themselves and save visits. Now that's another way you can look after 1,400 patients when they're more empowered and educated. But I always kind of say, if I was full disclosure, if I was a full fee for service doctor and I only got paid for seeing people, my website would come down the very next day and every single person would be coming in. Now, you'd still use some of these principles though, like getting all this information up front, for example, still saves time on it would still save time in a fee for service model. It would just be a total shift in terms of like, nope, everyone comes in, everyone comes in, everyone comes in, everyone comes in.
Yeah, it is that pivoting to the environment that you're in, including how you're compensated or how your appointments are
Yeah.
booked. Like all of this matters when it comes to that sustainability of how you practice. We need to think about you too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the value of your time, as you said at the beginning.
yeah. It's kind of
So
like these different payment models are like, if you think about it, when you mentioned even one there with Australia, and then we were talking about Alberta and Ontario, the game is the wrong word because it has bad connotations, but like strategy is that like there is a strategy to maximizing our time in this model. So as the models shift, and some don't, right? Some I'm more of the like I like chess, I like poker, I like games. And again, going back to the way my mind works, I think it's like regardless of what model you put me in, I'm going to find the most efficient way to utilize it.
agree. And that's what my brain loves too. And that's why I like coaching the physicians who are and clinicians who are looking to create these sustainable days is we say, okay, tell me all the things about your environment so I can help you strategize
Yeah,
with the finding of the ways for you. It's super fun. It makes my brain excited too.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Then you said other things like the offboarding for you, because we're trying to now think about the value of your time. So how are we using other pieces of and people in your environment?
So I think delegation is key. So, and going back to that initial foundational concept of know the value of your time. So if the doctor's time is worth $350 per hour, but a nurse is worth, maybe $30 give or take an hour, or in a reception is maybe 20 to 25. So you've got to be able to maximize people's scope and potential. You don't want, you know, you know, untrained reception staff, they're not going to be doing injections, but to work within a person's scope and allow them to maximize their time. Like you don't need to have a full RN nurse or even an RPN to do blood pressure checks, for example. Like, so at our clinic, we have, like, I know some clinics that still have, they kind of probably are underemployed, like they're underutilizing delegation and staff where the doctor's still bringing the patient in, doing the weight, doing the blood pressure. I mean, that's 2, 3 minutes right there that's just gone wasted, right? And if you break the doctor's time down, if you break doctor time versus hiring a staff member time, you like you the it's just insane to me to waste, like, again, quote unquote, waste your time by doing these tasks that someone else could do. So delegation to staff members, and if you see anything in your office or your workflows that could be done by paying someone at the rate of 20, 25, or $30 an hour, and your time's worth $300 an hour, it's a no-brainer to hire and delegate, right, wherever possible. And that also includes technology. So there's delegate to people and also delegate to technology. We've got some exciting technology emerging with AI scribes, for example, right? And we've talked about EMR tools and templates and learning how to do those things. Again, investing a small amount of time upstream can pay exponentially downstream, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's important that we kind of understand when you're saying to their highest scope. So you're helping your nurse do things that a nurse needs to do that nobody else within your team could do. But there's things your nurse is doing that is
Yeah,
not nurse work, just like there's things that you're doing that is not physician or clinician work. And it's identifying
yeah,
them and then
yeah,
who could do this better than me with some training, right?
yeah,
Because they've got the
yeah.
time to.
I mean, I've recently hired my own my direct, like we co-hire staff at our clinic. There's 4 doctors and we co-hire staff. But I've also even now hired my own direct nurse, and I'm training her to be, do more and more of my diabetic visits and do more and more, teaching her even back pain and things like that, right? Like there's you can eager, capable, competent staff members you can train to do, like, the sky's the limit, right? And the other part is, I mean, if you look at there's a great YouTube video one time on what motivates people. and it was like autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And so when you empower, it's not even once you get beyond a certain level of money, their point was is like it doesn't even matter about how much you're paying them. It's about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So my point is you can have a better morale in your team, better morale in your clinic when people are really working to their maximum potential.
Yeah.
I
Very
I
good.
once funny little side story, but there was a story on social media, the social media groups, and one doctor was commenting on on going to Costco to save $25 on a mop. And I was and it was and I was like, why was this even brought to your attention? Like, not let alone the actual act of like driving, like how much time that this was the doctor, right? Going to Costco to buy the mop, right? I'm like, the time and the gas of the doctor's time is one thing, but why was it even brought to your attention? Like that shouldn't even be something that is on our minds. In our clinic, we empower our staff to so I used to be the lead physician of the team, and we had this approval process for okaying vacation time or leave time. So you get this form and it's okay, so and so wants this time off. And my first question would be to go to the front and say, hey, is this work for everyone? Like I'm basically rubber stamping something that they know their job better. They're going to know if we pull this person away or they're off, how are things going to suffer, right? So for forever now, we've empowered our staff to self-manage like the front, right? Like you guys, like we don't like, work it out. Come get us if you need us, right? So that empowering them gives them more job satisfaction and purpose, and then we as the doctors don't need to get involved in all that fine detail unless we're needed.
Yeah, very good. Because those type of HR questions can get very muddy, and it's none of your business. You don't know their job and how it's going to work if somebody's not there.
Yeah.
Good
Or
insight.
at least have a well-trained and nurtured clinic manager in your team, right? Like that can deal with that stuff, the HR stuff, the day-to-day, because we as the doctors are busy enough trying to look after our patients and stuff. And get us involved if we need to be, but we can let that kind of manage itself at the front.
Mhm. Any other tips, tricks, efficiency-wise that you've found helpful, or when you've noticed other people's practice, like even compared to your colleagues now, or as you're hearing stories within your circles of other things that people are using?
I think one that comes up a fair bit is, and I think this would be applicable to not just the faux model, this capitated model in Ontario, but reducing prescription renewal burden has been a big thing. And again, I haven't heard a whole article on this, and I think we'll dive into this in the follow-up podcast on uninsured services. But chart like there are ways. So some prescription renewals are unavoidable, but I've got data that showed like how dramatically prescription renewals will drop requests if you charge a fee, for example. But more to the point of efficiency in my EMR, and I think many EMRs, I started using this and I wrote about what's called quote unquote resetting the clock technique. And again, in a faux model, my goal is to see a patient maybe once and try to empower them to be free for the year, not have to come see me. Now, it rarely happens, right? They're going to have something else go wrong, sore throat or back pain next month. But for a portion of those patients, if they're in for back pain today and I see their prescription renewals are coming due in May, for example, or even 3 or 4 months, I will mention, hey, by the way, I'm renewing all your years worth of medications that I don't foresee you changing. So here's your other renewals. I've refreshed those renewals, even though it doesn't say it on your bottle right now. You have a full year's worth of medications, and I think that those techniques like that have been a very big improvement in efficiency and like so whenever I worked at the math, whenever a prescription renewal request comes through your office, it costs us in terms of doctor time, staff time, resources about $22, give or take,
Mm.
by the time it's all run its course through. So again, some of them are unavoidable, but if you can eliminate half those, that's a big burden.
Yeah, I like that, and um, sometimes, and I know you're in a rural community, and this probably makes a big difference because I'm in a rural community as well. So we can kind of update our pharmacists and they know us. And we only have like 6 local pharmacies to pick from. So they kind of all know us. And so if we send the year's scripts, we know that will reset the clock, like you said, for
Yeah,
those
yeah,
scripts,
yeah.
but not always. So some of our pharmacies don't want to reset the script because it mucks up with their ability to message us and get paid for that and those types of
Oh,
back. So for instance, I will get a script renewal for one of my patients who's on at least 6 medications. They got a very complex panel. One of the medications will come through today. I go in the chart, there's at
well,
least 6 all
yeah.
due on the same date
So
for renewal, but one comes through today. And if I don't attack it, like as in choose to renew it today,
yeah,
the next one will be here tomorrow or in 2 days' time. Like it's that constant dripping
yeah.
because there is on the other side potential for compensation.
See
And so
the
it's this like fine line of, listen, you guys, here's your year's worth of scripts and cancel all the old ones,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
we're actually using the dialogue that helps them understand what to do with this script so they're not all still out of order a year later.
Your it's funny because so rural town, I'm fortunate enough that I say 80% of our prescriptions go to the pharmacy across the street. So
Mhm.
we had back when we were trying to look at how to reduce this exact what you're describing is that exact burden. That is why it's so important as a person who's on 10 meds that you don't get one request today and another two next week and then and so forth, right? And so we actually had meetings with the pharmacists and say, hey, how can we improve this? We tried everything. We tried posters and voicemail messages, gentle reminders and nudges. Nothing worked. I don't know how the billing is different from pharmacists in Ontario versus Alberta, but
It should be
we were all game
similar.
to try to reduce that request. Nothing worked until we charged a fee though. Like it just we tried everything, and then you can and I have the data on this article you can on the website that shows where I graphed the number of requests and then just dramatic drop. And I was improved. Prior to that, we tried everything else, all the gentle stuff.
Interesting, very interesting. So that's just some, I like that you do this trial and error, and then you're like, and guess what, guys? If you start charging your patients for renewals, all those drips go away.
Yeah. You know what's funny though is doctors are a contrary breed. It's in that um we're evidence based, right? We're supposed to be science based and logic based and so forth. And it's funny because I can show this objective data, and then there's always the yeah, but like we so many people immediately jump to the skeptical part of yeah, but and it's so funny that people we won't a lot of we won't take that jump or follow the evidence in many cases, right? There's no evidence actually to suggest the contrary, but there's still this reluctance, and it's just a funny observation to notice sometimes.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of objections. It's an interesting and yeah, controversial kind of proposal to charge for script renewals. It's just simply an example of the
Yeah,
efficiency and the things that are in your inbox that are driving you crazy, and and an optional, innovative option that was tried
yeah,
and tested by Adam, right?
yeah.
And his team. So it's just
And
just
and
information.
reproduced to every person who does it. They're like, oh, it does work.
Exactly. So it's not that you have to start charging for scripts. It's just simply a noticing that there's other ways to do these workflows that might
Yeah.
help reduce drips in your inbox. All right. So anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about with regards to today?
I just think we touched on it a little bit, but I think the big maybe the big concept of um, doctors tend to be so expense adverse, and not just doctors, but it's a psychological phenomenon, I guess, where we might obsess over like a 1% or 2% expense, but then not realizing that maybe that expense grows the revenue or like by 50%. And that might even be like say hire like we talked about hiring a staff, right? Okay, I hire staff and it might cost me $30,000 a year to hire that staff. Sorry, more like 50, 60 these days. But if that can translate into increased capacity that then generates 100,000, it's those types of decisions that I think it'd be wise of doctors to start looking at the bigger picture of the bigger pie and less at the bottom line. There's been a lot of talks on that too, and I hope that becomes more of an awareness moving forward. And yeah, I think otherwise, I think we talked about a lot of the stuff. I think, yeah, upstream innovation, knowing the value of your time, delegate, key concepts.
Hmm. The Track Your Time app, I know I'm going to get questions about it. Which one are you using on your phone?
So no vested interest here. And this is old. The reason I kept using it, it's one called Eternity. And again, no vested interest. They should probably maybe a sponsor. It's a little red icon. But I think when I looked it up one time, you just like time tracking apps. And I like that one because one, it was granular. I could set up the different categories of whatever I wanted to do. And it had the option to another key feature you want to look for is just to export to the data to Excel, for example, or a spreadsheet where you can, accumulate it, track it. But so I think that was like, I don't know, it might have been like $3 like for the app to buy it. But there's probably about a dozen good ones on there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that it's nice to kind of have some tools up your sleeve. We work on we do give people within the program kind of an idea on how to start to track, time in the room with the patient, time that it takes to chart this kind of visit, so that you can start to think about, is my appointment schedule correctly aligned, so
Yeah,
that we know that we're going to be starting to run closer to time. And as we build skills, we reevaluate all of that. Even what is your nurse doing, and tracking that for 24 hours or for a day here and a day there,
yeah,
just to see like what sort of things is she doing? Is she doing nursing things? Or, oh, hang on a minute, she's doing something that we could totally give to the receptionist, and then we'd have less bottleneck of people trying to get their
yeah,
things done. And that can make a world of difference to how our clinics can run and our staff can work to their best capacity. And even just asking them, what do you not enjoy about your job? And then somebody else says, but I love that part. And you're like, oh,
yeah,
good.
yeah.
We're going to take that off you and give it to them.
So, so a little side, I mentioned I have hired a great nurse, and she's doing some diabetes visits, and I've trained her. And sky's the limit, I think. In this case, I hired the person and not the designation, right? Because um, she, uh, she will with time learn many things.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, I'm going to admit I do not like seeing coughs and colds anyway. I find it a little bit soul crushing to see coughs and colds. So coughs and colds get booked with my nurse, and I actually like diabetes visits, but after 15 years of doing them and doing it, it does become a little like repetitive. It's just like so, and it's a big chunk of the day, right? Like a couple hours often in terms of 4, 5, 6 diabetic visits in the day, right? So what the fact that or mental health, my nurse this particular has experience in mental health work, whereas I will fully admit I am not a hand-holding, touchy-feely person. I'm not good at mental health counseling. But the point, I've been able to offload the work that I don't like, I
Mm-hmm.
can at least, no, I can't entirely avoid it. I still need to go see the patients at the end, but I can delegate so much of that work to a person who can. So I guess the main point is it's not just about the money, but also you can delegate to free up your time for your passions a little more too.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Um, Even the whole this is what you have, the diagnostic part is the physician or clinician role, but then and to tell you more about this, I'm going to go
Yeah,
give you to my nurse Sally, who is going to have the time and much better at talking you through the
exactly.
next steps.
Yeah,
That division of labor is huge when
yeah.
it comes to what patients can learn in an appointment and how long it's going to take you to get that work done.
And you can be on as the doctor. You've just said that you can be on to the next patient
Mm-hmm.
like them, right? So it's another key concept in efficiency there.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Where can people find you again? Tell us that website again.
So probably these are stewartmedicine.com. It's STEWART, medicine.com. I've got lots of patient education material there, blog articles that I've written over the years. I also have, I think we're going to do another follow-up podcast on patient serve, which is, so I have that email, it's actually listed somewhere on my website too, on the contact information, but dr.stewart@patient serve. That's patient with serve, SCRV without an E on the end. But anyway, I think the links would be on my website if people ever wanted to reach out and contact me that way.
Yeah, perfect. Wonderful. And anything before we end this today? Anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to just mention before we go?
I think that I just think it's amazing how that nearly an hour just flew by.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful for your time. I think that it just keeps people thinking about that efficiency piece and the things that are coming into their day and how they can kind of get them off their plate faster, so that we can get to that volume of things without that excess backlog being generated. So thank you so much. Thanks for being here. And I'm looking forward to talking to you next time.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.